Now I'd like to give you some examples of how to apply your gloss varnish. Very simple process, and when you're applying your varnish, don't try and do it all in one coat. You'll get a better result if you do 2 or 3 coats rather than trying to put one thick coat on. Just get yourself into trouble doing it that way. So don't be impatient, one coat at a time, and you can just keep adding it until you get it to how you want it to look. Now, I'm using the Clear Gloss Varnish. You can use satin and you can use flat. So there's different ones you can get to do this artwork that you want. If you want to keep it looking in a flat look, obviously you use the flat. What the varnish does, 1, it protects your artwork. 2, it enhances the colours. So sometimes with an acrylic paint, when it dries, it'll flatten right off. If you want that colour to come up really rich again, a good coat of varnish will do that for you and help bring that colour back up and give a real richness to your artwork. Now when you apply it, as I said, you don't put too much on at once. The thing I like about the Atelier is that it's very liquid. You don't have to add water to it, you don't have to break it down. Some of the varnishes you get, you've got to add water to it and break it down so it'll work well for you and flow onto the canvas. Bit more mucking around, a bit harder to do. Now to put it on, all I'm going to do, put some in a container, and then when we apply it, you must have your artwork completely dry. What I do, just to be on the safe side, I leave them 3, 4, 5, 6 days, something like that. Plenty of time to dry out properly. If you're in a very humid condition, leave it a bit longer and let it dry longer. The reason being, with your artist acrylics and with the Atelier Interactive, it can start to react with the paint if you start putting it on too thickly and a lot of hard strokes with your brush. So I'll show you how to do it, and please follow the way I do it. All you need is a brush full of the varnish, and we just run it straight across the canvas. Now I do this with a feather touch, really lightly. Now what I'm not doing is I'm not coming up here and then go back over this. Once you've put some on, keep going. Don't go back. If you missed a tiny little bit, leave it. Come back for your second coat and you'll catch that little bit you missed. And as you can see, all I'm doing is just very lightly, no pressure on this brush, just dragging it across. Now the 2 reasons I'm not putting pressure on. If I keep going back and going over the top, all it does is after a period of time, the varnish starts to thicken, and then you'll have brush marks through there and it'll really start to make a mess. So don't go back and work it again. Once you've put it there, leave it alone. The other reason is you don't want to keep working it in as hard as you can and then start to pick up the paint, and then you start smearing paint. You don't want any of that to happen to an artwork you've just finished. So again, just keep on going. Just gently right across. This one's already had a coat on. I'm putting a second coat over this. And if I wanted to, I can put a 3rd and a 4th. But as you see, I just dip it in, and it's like water. It spreads so easily. There's no effort in it, and it'll get into all the crevices just in one easy go. And I'm going in the direction of the artwork on this one. If you've got an artwork which has no direction basically, put one coat on in one direction and then the next coat in the opposite direction. And don't be in a hurry. Let the coat dry completely, overnight. Let it be completely dry before you put your second coat on. Because if you try and put a second coat on while that other coat's still wet, you'll start picking up the varnish and start causing all sorts of problems with the finish. Don't be impatient. You don't want to ruin a good artwork just because you're a little bit impatient as far as putting your varnish on. And of course you'll always get some that runs down the sides. Just go along with your brush. You can put a little bit of extra on if you want to get those sides glossy as well. Just round the other sides. Any little drips that run down, you just catch those and even them out and spread them out. Now it'll always have a bit of a milky look to it because it is like a milky colour. That will dry crystal clear. So don't worry about that. You haven't ruined your artwork. And that's all you have to do to put your varnish on. That's it, finished. Leave it, let it dry completely, see what it's like when it's finished. If you're happy, that's it, finished. Your artwork's protected, and you've got a nice finish on that work. If you want to keep applying it, well then, one at a time, just like I did there. That's the second coat on this one, and I probably won't need a third, but it's up to you how many you put on. So that's an easy example of doing it, and I'll show you another one now in using more of a texture, so you can understand how to apply it to a textured artwork. Now I'm going to show you how to put some gloss varnish on a more textured artwork. The same rules apply. Make sure it's totally dry. Don't rush putting this on. Using the same type of brush, and what I always suggest to people, have a brush especially just for your varnish. So you don't have any paint pigments in it, you don't use dirty brushes. Always use the same brush. Keep it to one side. As soon as you're finished, wash it out thoroughly, get all that varnish out of it, and then you can use it again on your next artwork. There's nothing worse than using a brush that's got some paint in it and then suddenly you start smearing colour across, some black across some blue or something like that, and ruin your artwork. Always keep the brush separate. Now when we're doing some texture, we put it on a little bit differently. I don't put as much on the brush, I just take a little bit of it off. And then just put it on very gently, again, no rubbing backwards and forwards. Once we've put it on like that, unload some of that out of your brush, just run across and then run it back down very gently, no pressure. And that's going to just dry off and dry off nice and clear. Okay? Again with this one up here, hardly any, I've just got a tiny bit on the end of this brush. That's why I say do, 2, 3, 4 coats. And again, this is just really gentle, just to dip it in. And once we've got it right across the area you want to do, and do it quickly, don't leave it too long. Once you've got it covered, you can just run across the other way like so. Now it'll look like you've got a few little puddles here and there, but they will dry out. Alright, and just really lightly, I've just got that on a feather touch just to try and just break some of those little bits up of damming up there. And that's that section done. I'd go over to here, same thing. You know, a bottle of this just goes such a long way. You really don't use a lot of this product. It's very economical. And it's because it's so thin, it spreads so easily like water, not like the thicker ones where you've really got to brush it in there and try and get it into the actual artwork. This gives you a better finish at the end of the day. Now that's where I've gone there, reached across onto the green here. Just go back a little bit very lightly. I'm just letting the tip of the brush touch this artwork. And that's it for that textured area. Now we want to do this area here. I'd start here because I've got an overlap. So just run it in the direction of your artwork. This artwork, we've got the direction of running around, following these same lines. Again, just dipping it into the brush, just spread it out very thinly. We don't want it thick, as long as you get a coating on it. And we don't want to be working the brush into the paint. Otherwise we could reactivate some of the paint, and you don't want that. Even though it looks properly dry, sometimes that will happen. So the easiest way not to have that happen is just be nice and gentle. Just right around the edge here. I'm just following this around. And I'm trying not to go over where I've already put that varnish on. And here we're just changing directions a little bit and going with the grain of the paint and the artwork itself. And again, just a really thin coat. And the first coat's the most important one because that's the one that's going to seal the artwork. And what I mean by seal the artwork, it seals the paint. So if you're going to have any problems by brushing too hard, it'll be on the first coat. So that's why I say put a thin, very lightly dusted coat on without working your paintbrush up and down on the artwork. Once it's sealed, well then your painting's safe. Your next coat, you can be a bit harder with it if you like. You're not going to react those paints together and cause any bleeding or a little bit of paint rubbing off where it shouldn't be. When you've got it properly dry, you shouldn't have that problem anyhow. But nice and light first coat, put it away, let it dry, at least 24 hours, come back and do your next coat exactly the same way. And of course you can finish off around the edges like we said, all the way around. Any drips and dribbles that are running down, we just pick them off, just run it through. It seals your edges as well, exactly the same as we did with the last one. I'm just running it to the same direction as the paint's going. And as I said, if you see a little bit that you missed, leave it. Don't go back. Do it on the second coat, okay? That's very important. That's when you get into trouble. When the varnish has been sitting on that paint and getting into there and softening the paint in any way, then you hit it with a brush again later, you can cause some problems. Leave it, don't be tempted, come back on your second coat. Now, I've done 2 artworks with that little bit in the bottom of that container and I've still got some left. Shows you how far it goes. You don't want to put too much on. So I hope that explains how to do your gloss varnish. It's the same for satin and it's the same for your flat. Exactly the same process. So happy painting, and I hope you can create something as exciting as this.